This is Chronic Curiosity, real conversations with real people. Here we go.
Well, yeah, I guess what I was going to say, like is I feel like this is an opportunity for some people to hear from someone who is a survivor in a lot of ways. I think it'll be encouraging for a real specific group of people, but I think a lot of people will relate to it or be encouraged. Just in the first time that I heard Don share kind of his background and where he's been and his experience, it's just so intense. It's so heavy that I think it can almost be like this is a movie. You know, we become desensitized a lot of times if we expose ourselves to movies with a lot of graphic and violence and sort of sensationalism. And so for me, hearing Don's story, I was just like, I needed time to process it. And, and I don't know, you may find that, or your listeners may find that, your viewers as well. So I would just say it's one of those things you almost need to say from the front side, that there might be sensitive things that could be a trigger for some people, or just sensitive in nature for people who have been through abusive situations or very, very difficult family dynamics. So
yeah, it's appreciated. And we've talked about a lot of different things on this show, from people losing family members to drug abuse, alcoholism, homelessness, like we all to ridiculous comedic type things, and conspiracy theories and politics and all these different things. But I think it's a good point that I was talking to Don before we started. It was it's, to me, the interesting thing about people and hearing other people's stories is you just never know what you can pull out of it, right?
Yeah.
I mentioned that my wife Cass and I, we grew up in the same very, very close area. From the outside, our upbringings and our stories seemingly would be very similar. But then, if you really get into each person's lives, like there's a lot there to, to mine and to uncover and to take out from, and be able to benefit from. So I guess, Don, I really appreciate you being here. And Chris, thank you for that. I think it sounds like a great introduction. So I don't know if, Don, you want to introduce yourself and kind of tell a little bit about, where you came from, and, kind of to start the story off, since Chris kind of opened that wide open for us.
You laid the groundwork. Well, thank you, Chris, for that. Yeah, I was born in Honduras, Tegucigalpa, Honduras, and in to a 13-year-old mother, and I guess my dad would have been a teenager as well. And
there you go.
Okay.
Perfect.
And so my dad was a drug dealer, like that. Still to this day, when I go to Honduras, I see people driving in nice cars and living in nice houses, and I think, like, that could have been my dad. But there's a lot of drugs coming out of Honduras into the United States. So I was born into that environment. It was also, in the backdrop of that was the Iran-Contra conflict, which Americans rarely, I hear, they are confused, like Iran, but I was born into that really difficult geopolitical situation where there was just a lot of like pro-communism and anti-communism, and so I was born into that environment. And so my earliest memories are really young, because there's a lot that happened in between that. From 0 to 3, I would say. I was born in Tegucigalpa. I think one of the highlights, even like as a child, was playing marbles. We would kill each other for the biggest marble. And I think they say I still have scars on my face from scrapping with kids, shooting marbles in the streets because I wanted to win. But my earliest memories were, probably the most violent. My mom was she was trying to make a living for us. She had nowhere to go, the permanent. So she was a prostitute, and she would take me to some of her, you know, places of business. So, you know, really young, I was affected by, you know, the domestic violence end of things, and also just with the war scenes and the domestic violence things. Like I, like really young, just realized that life is a really rough place. And so, yeah, I was 3 years old when I saw my first person get killed in the streets with an AK-47. So that was really tragic, you know, that in our streets playing marbles, there was a pro-communism tilt in our neighborhoods, that they would come in, murder children. When they would do it on purpose. They would want the people to turn towards communism, so that they would get voted into power. And then they would say, hey, if you let us in, we'll stop the violence. So it was really a brutal kind of way but that's guerrilla warfare. So when I was about 4 years old, it really like reached a point where like my mom heard about an orphanage that the Mennonite community had started. And I remember going from Tegucigalpa on a bus into the countryside, which was completely different, going from an urban environment into like the very slower paced way of life. But in a way, I never had seen that before. So being able to see things just move at a much slower pace was refreshing for me as a child. Also, it was a religious organization. So they took me to church every Sunday. You know, I went to Sunday school. But they were really like ultra religious. You know, in fact, I have some pictures here of what I would have looked like as a child. Very like the suspenders and the clothing, and you know, like
almost like a
Amish kid. Yeah, exactly. So
A cute kid.
yeah, thanks.
I got better.
Yeah. So but I think like even at that point in my life, I'm like, I look different. I'm different from from the other people who are from America. And I think that was probably my awakening to like some of the racism that I would experience in my life. It's just, kids are cruel. It's just the way it is. And so yeah, I started there. I went to that orphanage at the age of about 4, and then I was adopted at the age of 6 years old. So that was really brutal to go there, and my mom took me there, and didn't tell me anything. We got on a bus, we got off at the bus stop, and I went and played on the swing sets and turned around, and she was completely gone. So yeah, that really affected me, because I think as an older person, I would be like, well, how do you tell a kid this? What would what are you going to say? So yeah, I turned around and she was gone. So the matron, I actually have a picture of her too, the lady that would have taken care of me, she was the one that had to tell me, hey, your mom's not coming back and you're in our care now. So it went from like a very urban, violent environment into like a lot of other pain of like, where do I belong? This doesn't smell like home.
Right.
I have to eat oatmeal for breakfast. Like, it was all different. I had to eat American food, and like, how do you say that, without making people feel bad? Or it was always confusion. So while I'm there, this orphanage so I was born Junior Sorel Hernandez Argeniel, but my name is Don King. And one of the reasons that is because Honduras and many other countries are embarrassed that children are adopted at such a high rate. So they say that they pass laws that say the next of kin is required to be notified if you have a child up for adoption. So lawyers say, okay, we'll make that easy. We'll change the child's name and birth date and then advertise it. and it'll guarantee the adoption. So that's a very common practice in foreign countries to this day. So that was very difficult. When I was about 5 years old, I was going to be adopted into the King family, and this lady invited me into her bedroom, which was a very like we weren't allowed in there. And she got down on her knees and she looked at me and she said, "Your name is no longer Junior. It's going to be Don." And I'm like, I hate that name.
Yeah, it's such a different name.
I hate that name.
What do you mean?
Yeah, like what's wrong with? I remember to this day thinking like, what's wrong with my name?
Right. Yeah. What's wrong with me?
What's wrong? Why can't I have that name? And I remember she started crying, and I was thinking, we're in trouble. Yeah, you know, like if she's crying, I'm in trouble. So yeah, that was very difficult to. Like I really resisted that. I don't, in just a lot of ways, just like acting out, being angry. But I think I started to learn how to hate inside my heart. Like I just, I didn't know where to go with it. Like who are you going to lash out? Who are you going to lash out to when you're full of hatred like that? Like of circumstances in life, and not being able to verbalize like what's really freaking going on here.
Yeah, particularly when sorry to not to interrupt, but I guess I connect with a little bit of that is if you you have this, at least from my sense of a feeling of abandonment from your own parents and kids, that's who they lash out against, right? Because it's that one person that you can, because your parents are typically there and you can lash out at them, but when they're not, who do you lash out at, right?
Yeah.
So you learn to hate.
Yeah. It was a really deep hatred. I learned to hate people. I learned that you don't have to fight with words. I think it's really probably one of the most destructive things I learned was that I can just look at you and hate you. And I can make that go across the room. Yeah. You can know that I hate you. And so that was really destructive, especially when you're trying to have like a long-term relationship. So we're 5 years old. My name has changed. The family that adopted me was the King family. They were oil manufacturers in Hagerstown, Maryland. I would love to say that I had a good adoptive experience, but I say with confidence that many people I've met who've been through my circumstances, we all know that there's a really dark side underbelly to adoption, which is heartbreaking because the hell that we left, the invitation and the promise and the hope was it's gonna be better. And I remember at the orphanage, one of the things that we would celebrate is like, the children, once they had a forever home, they would take us to the airport and we would help them get on the plane. And then we would stand at the end of the runway and be like, see ya, hopefully we'll meet someday. And just thinking like, could that be possible? Are good things possible in store for me? Like, or is that for everyone else, So that was really difficult because some children couldn't be adopted. Their parents wouldn't sign off on documents. There's a lot of difficulties surrounding that. So my story is very complicated because the King family had lost a child. I was 5, almost 6 years old. And they had lost a biological child about 6 months before I was adopted in a boating accident. So I didn't know what that meant at all. But our paperwork was completed. My name was changed and I was assigned to that family, plus 5 other children. I don't know why they adopted so many children, but they did.
All at once?
They adopted my brother, my younger brother, and then a girl who wasn't any like biological connection. And then they adopted my younger brother and my sister who has no biological connection. The girl had no biological connection in, 2 and then 3. So, yeah. So we came into a home where from the get-go, it was chaos. We had tremendous needs, the language barrier, the abandonment, just a lot of things. And then this big hole where the youngest boy. And so that was really a cruel thing. My father was a cruel man. He hid his pain behind all this, like, you'll never be as good as this son. that was my favorite son.
Mm.
And it reawakened in me that hatred of people. In fact, I think you can see it here. This is me getting off the airplane in Virginia, stepping into America to my home. That was my dad, and he was a very cold person. So that was me.
It's
There.
like business.
It's business. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. You did it,
Mm.
So then that's what it was. Adoption for me was like almost like having a dog. If they're fed and watered and they look good, and we have this like unearned virtue that don't ask us if we're good people. We're good people. We adopted 5 children.
Mm.
So it hit a catastrophe, and many people's lives were ruined, I would say, by that, especially my brothers and sisters who still to this day struggle with a lot of what happened in that home. So I go from adoption, from my biological mother, to the orphanage life, to the King family. And like I said, my dad, I would say he taught me though entrepreneurship. He had an oil company, and he had a small blending tank. I grew up in this right there, about a 900-gallon tank, and we blended oil, and we would make 1540s, hydraulic oils, tractor hydraulic fluids. And there was something about the mental toughness that took to just year in, year out.
The grind.
It was a grind, and not many people could put up with that. But I loved it. I had all my last name was on every single container leaving that building, and it just really like put inside of me this like pride of like,
It'll give you something.
yeah, something
to hold
sparkling.
on to.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get that.
So yeah, I grew up with that. I try to I think it matters how I talk about my adopted family, but I think that there's truth in there too. I was physically, sexually abused at a very young age, which I think, for sure, just it's a low self-worth, low self-image. I don't think you can come back from that without some kind of like intervention.
And it changes you.
It's 100%. Yeah.
It absolutely changed. And I guess I don't want to, I've mentioned this once or twice before. And I guess maybe taking a real quick step back, just so I can quantify or qualify this a little bit. I didn't necessarily grow up with the greatest childhood, but I was sexually abused when I was a kid as well. So like, I guess I have a connection, an understanding, an empathy, I guess would be the easiest word for it, is to, be able to connect, I'm sure in the smallest little tiny way, to what that means for a kid, and, childhood traumas and how you grow up, and, what that does to you psychologically without you ever even knowing it, until, which I'm sure we'll get into this, because I'd like to understand, how you develop and change, and progress your way out of, being controlled by that. Because at least I know that was my experience in a sense, was it controlled me without ever knowing it. Until you get old enough and go, why am I such a jerk?
Yeah.
I got some stuff I got to deal with.
Yeah.
So but I guess it just breaks my heart, and I feel you, I guess. So I'm trying to say. So not to interrupt you too much there, but
No, it's real. I think that I love having these conversations because I think men are being brave now and finding their voice and realizing that it's healthy, it's therapeutic, and almost probably a must to find healthy males, because that's the answer. You have to find healthy people to surround yourself with. Not to like zoom ahead, but let me go back. There was a lot that I was one of the ways I lost myself was just in hours and hours of work, and I became a workaholic. That was definitely my escape. But in that, I learned logistics. I learned how to talk to people. Um, I learned that if you had a good product, it would sell itself. If you had good service. And I also learned that people are extremely lonely. We would have people coming in and there was something about a counter and like you getting money from people that people they would just share crazy things that were happening in their life. And it was really fascinating to me because I'm like, what do we want in life? He really wants what I want in the most fundamental way. He wants safety. He wants stability. Um, he wants a good, healthy relationship. But I grew up in the 90s. The R&B and the hip hop and this like sexual revolution that was happening. And I grew up in Maryland, so there was Baltimore, there was DC. So a lot of liberal ideology and culture. And as I came out of that abuse, I was very hypersexual. I was awakened very young, and I unfortunately I didn't know boundaries. They were, and that I think if I mourn anything, it's that what would it have been to have known a healthy touch from a male, a healthy touch from a female. But the 90s, it was just set up for me to like go into this like very erotic, sensual, and there were people who I looked up to who just embraced it. There's the One Love, all the lyrics, and people made a lot of money because it was an easy sell, And I realize, I'm looking around at 60-year-old men who are acting like 16-year-olds, and I'm thinking, is that what I admire in men? This very hypersexual, loose, they call it freedom. But there was a bondage in it too, because fundamentally, they were extraordinarily lonely men. And talking about curiosity, it made me very curious. I'm like, you're free though. You're not held in by a wife. You're not held in by cultural constraints, but you're so lonely. What's missing? So, so I was my mother. I was 21. She died of cancer in a short amount, about an 8-month period. She died at 54 of ovarian cancer, and I had a terrible relationship with my father. I think as I was aging, he was wanting a more of a relationship, but it was like there was nothing there before.
Too little, too late.
Yeah, exactly. And in a way, I had some sympathy for him because I'm like, if I had a son and he was 20 years old and this is my first car. My dad bought me my first car.
Oh, your first car.
It was a 2001 Crown Victoria.
Yeah.
It's a boat of a car. You couldn't tell me nothing.
No, I get that. I think that's every 21-year-old now, right? You can't get out of here. I'm an adult now, even though I'll find out later that my brain's not fully developed yet, but I don't know it yet. Yeah.
You couldn't tell me anything. There was some highlights like that, I don't want to like minimize, because there were some highlights where I'm like, yeah, if I do think of my childhood, there were some moments where, but even with that, there was like a really controlling everything. My parents were extraordinarily religious. We didn't miss I think I might have missed 5 Sundays of church from 6 years old to 20 years old. And that was very curious to me, because I'm like, on Sunday morning, you look like this, but Monday through Saturday, you live like everyone else. And that was really hard on me, because I'm like, what is religion? What's the point? Why don't we just call her? And of course, with that, they were white family. So they could trace their roots through this lineage to conservative people. And I'm like, my lineage is Mayan Indian. We sacrificed our kids. But that's who I am. I can't change that any more than I can change who you are. And so there was like this always crying out to like identity. But they spoke English. I lost Spanish to just survive. So I was in this in-between world all the time. The Latino community was like, who are you?
Yeah.
And the white
you're not
people,
this, and you're not that.
Exactly. Like, do you really not know Spanish? Do you hate us so much that you don't speak Spanish?
Another bullet point of what's wrong with me. Huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was always the reinforcement of like, I must be really that different. So my mom dies of cancer, and that really, like, that she really grounded me. And I was 21, 22 years old, and I was facing 53 years in a state penitentiary. And I tell people all the time that for the first time in my life, I had human rights. If somebody sexually abused me there, I had human rights. In the church, there's no human rights. The church I grew up into, there was this condescension, belittling, we don't believe you, prove it kind of thing. And I come into prison, and it was a relief. For the first time in my life, there was like this, here's a correctional officer. He has 1 stripe, he has 2 stripes, he has 3 stripes, and there's a warden, and then there's the governor. That made sense to me. To me, like, it was like, it gave me an awakening of, like, there are people struggling to make us safe. There are people who are putting themselves on the lines out here to make sure that children go to school and come home in safety. And there's people even here in prison who are trying to do the same thing against really uphill battles. So I came in there, and I was really demoralized but in another way, I viewed myself as a disposable child. I felt like in life, that's a conclusion, a really destructive conclusion I came to in my early 20s, where I said, well, some people are valuable and some people aren't. I'm one of those disposable children who are easily thrown away. So I did disposable acts.
Why does it matter?
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, if no one else cares, why should I?
Exactly.
Right?
So I go into prison, and they said 53 years. And I'm like, my knees buckle. But in another way, I'm like, my life has been hell up to this point. Maybe something can work out. So the justice system works very slow. And I had a huge bond. But I was really curious. I started talking to men, and my life just stopped. I went from, thousands of text messages and thousands of phone calls and minutes on my phone. Remember the minutes on your phone? They would send you every month. I remember 4,000 minutes and 2,000 text messages in my 20s. That's, I was that guy. And I come into prison, and it just, boom. I hit a brick wall. And I feel like that's where I had to ask the hard questions. Why am I here? Why are you here? What are you doing here? And it was really hard to see broken humanity by the thousands. And I realized that I was not unlike most people here. Extraordinarily difficult stories. People with mental illness somehow ended up there with no advocacy at all. It was just heartbreaking. And in that, it fed my anger as well. So I'm like, what are we doing to each other? Are we a Western nation that enjoys this? Do we have no place for broken people? And I had to ask the really hard questions, mostly on my own, even though I grew up in church and I heard about God and Christ. To me, it was just a mockery.
It's hard when it seems very hypocritical, right? They're not practicing what they're preaching.
Yeah.
It's
just words. It's slogans.
Yeah.
Just do it. It's just a slogan.
Just do it, right? Yeah.
So I go, so I'm in there, but I start talking to people, and I'm like, why are you here? And everybody had a reason for what brought them there. And I thought one day, I just sat there one day and I said, I'm here because my mom had sex with my dad at 13 or 12, and now I'm here. And that's why I'm angry. It's her fault. And I thought, you're just dumb. You're dumb. Look at all this masses of humanity who have been wronged. Like, we have to get our act together. I remember one of the first things they did when they sent me to prison was I ended up having to do 22 months. which was long enough. But one of the first things they do is they ask you to push wheelchairs to the chow hall, and then you get to eat and then push them back. So my first wheelchair was this really overweight black man, and he was very outgoing and friendly, and it did something to me, man. Like having to push this guy, and I'm like, I'm in prison in my 20s. This guy is in his 60s in a wheelchair in prison. Like they knew what they were doing. And I thought, I can't die in prison. I cannot be a forgotten person in a wheelchair. And then I realized Vietnam veterans, Afghan war veterans, Iraq, our prisons are just full of those kind of people. And I was like, what did you do over there? And they would say it. And I'm like, oh, I would end up here too. I couldn't cope. And I was really sympathetic because some of these boys are my age, especially Afghan war vets. They were my age coming back and could not cope with life. But here I am, not having been through what they went through and still ended up at the same place. So they taught me how to play spades. I actually got good at it. I missed the spades games. But I had to stop, man. Like I'm like, are there any answers in people here? And I remember people used to come visit us. There were all kinds of people who ended up in prison coming to visit us. That was really fascinating to me because I'm like, but why can't you have this kind of community outside? But you'll do this good work of coming to visit. And I remember this guy, I don't know his name, but he used to come visit me, and he was a businessman, and he would just talk to me about his day and what he was doing. And I always looked forward to it. And he just never judged me. He never asked me why I was there. He just come see me. And it just lifted my spirits. And but it taught me how to like be a friend, how to care, you know? And I think probably one of the things that really affected me the most is I was just so angry. I was angry at myself. I was angry at society. And I actually was angry that I let my own brothers and sisters down. I was really close with my brother. He was 2 years younger than me, and he really floundered during those times I was in prison. Probably the hardest thing he ever said to me was like, "You were gone, bro," and we were struggling. Mom had just passed away. You're in prison, and he he put it on me, and he said, "You left us," and I said, "You have no idea. You have no idea." And so that was really difficult. He came to visit me. My dad visited me one time in jail in 22 months. I think it really hurt him to see me there in an orange jumpsuit and flip-flops. I think he really did have high hopes for me afterwards, but he just never could figure out how to say that outside of prison walls. But I'll give you one incident that I think was really pivotal. So I'm there doing time. I got my GED, and they told me if you get your GED, you'll go home 30 days sooner. So if I got my GED, I would have got out. If I didn't get my GED, I would have got out January 31st. And the worst place to be on Christmas Day is in prison. I have never seen a group of people more demoralized than being in prison on Christmas Day. So if I got my GED, I could go home January, like the early part of January. So I'm like, okay, it's a no-brainer for me. I'm going to sit here, and they taught us how to, I graduated my GED, so I went home early. But while I was there, I was just so upset at myself, and I just couldn't believe that I let my own self down like this. And one night, when they have shift change, they always count the beds and make sure everybody's where they're supposed to be. And this lady, we called her grandma. She had gray hair, and they literally give her a couple minutes, count everybody, but you had to sit on your bunk and be quiet. And I'm like, you're gonna tell a grown man to sit on his bunk and be quiet? So some newbie was there, and so it was like 75 men wall, and then 75 men. And somebody on the other wall said something stupid during the count. And the lady on the other side said, "Hey, all you men on my side of the wall, you have to sit on your bunk for 30 minutes. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back, where I found my voice. And I cussed. And she comes around the corner and she says, "You roll your shit." And I'm like, okay, well, I guess she got me. And I think it was just my body language. And she's huffing and panting. But, I was used to angry, riled up people. It's just like, oh, dang it. She actually knew. I didn't think they knew who I was. I was very quiet. She said, "Roll your shit." I'm like, okay. So I roll my stuff, pack all my stuff, and she puts me in solitary confinement for like a week. And that was rough. My goodness. Like, I thought, like, this is probably the hardest thing I've ever gone through as an adult, being in a very small cell. But at the same time, I feel like some of the things that I had been through prepared me for that. I had good books. But it was very difficult to be that alone. And so they have this little table they have just like this in prison. So a week later, they sat down and said, "Don, what did you do?" And I said, "Well, I cussed her out." And they're like, "Well, you can't do that. You're going to be home in like 3 months. Behave yourself. Go back in the regular population and behave yourself. You're almost there." And but I was thinking about it. I'm like, why am I here? Why am I in solitary confinement in my 20s? There's a lot of things that had to go wrong. And I don't know what made me think about it, but it's just like, but were there parts of your upbringing that you were raised better than this? And I thought, yes. My mother did try hard to raise a gentleman against all the odds. And I thought, I got to start doing things that are uncomfortable and different for myself. So I go back out into the yard, and this grandma is in the chow hall guarding the men. And she saw me, and she pulled back a little bit. And because there's always the threat of physical violence. Prison is nothing but violence. And I went up to her and I said, "Ma'am, I was raised better than that. I'm very sorry for having cussed you out." And she like almost touched my arm, but she didn't, because she can't. She's like, "Look," she said, "you're really influential. And we know who you are. We know that you're here." And she said, "If we have a bunch of people here acting out like you do, influential men acting out like you do, we cannot control the population." And I thought like that was like a T in the road for me to be like, do I really want to go down this path of destruction and see pain? Or is there a possibility that I could find the right footing and find the path through the slog to get to where I could have good influence and good outcomes, that I would be that person that people would call and say, "Dude, I really need your help." And I came out of prison in 2010, completely shattered. I was very much institutionalized. And the pastor actually that took me in at the orphanage, this is actually the orphanage in Honduras. Probably soon after I arrived there was a pastor in charge of that orphanage there. And he met me at the prison gates, and he said, "Why don't you come live with me for a while?" My dad wouldn't let me come home.
So he kept up with you since...
Yeah, he did. He actually he actually had moved into the area where my prison was. He was already there. And he said, "Why don't you come live with me for a while?" And so I did, and he was very gracious. He let me live in his basement for about a year, didn't charge me a dime, but just helped me get a job, reestablished. He was a preacher, a good man, and he just let me just become a whole person again. And there was a lot of people, though, that he was hanging out with and around that helped me like see a different way.
I was going to ask you before you told that story, or I was in my mind was like, what? It seems like you had come to some kind of self-awareness in a sense, and understood even maybe it was subconscious
Mhm.
that you're heading down that wrong path, you know? And do you think is there anything in addition, I guess, to that story that you found yourself at the fork in the road, and kind of got you to the point in life where it was like, hey, I gotta do something. You know, way on early in the podcast, we talked about this, and I make the comment. I think Tony brought it up at one point. We were talking, and I said that mine. You know, I was talking about a particular time in my life, and it was like, oh, this is the fork in the road,
Mhm.
or at least one of the big ones, right? I think we all have forks in the road throughout our entire life, right?
Mhm.
Constantly. There's always times where you're presented with a decision or a choice in life, and you may not always know exactly when that time is there. Sometimes seems like sometimes you do, and it's like, oh, I better get busy living or get busy dying.
Mhm. I think one of my greatest regrets was that my father was aging really fast. He had lost his interest in the business. And because I was in prison, he decided not to even give me a chance to buy it. And there was a real long story that happened where he ended up selling it to a drug user that came across as a business owner and ended up taking a $6 million business into the tank, something that I had a lot of pride in. And I was never in a situation where I could have financially helped bail it out. It was repoed by the bank. And my disposable attitude ensured that I had to start from the bottom. And in a way, I welcomed it. But in another way, I could have taken a $6, $7, $8 million business and probably made it into double that. I could have.
That hits hard.
It does.
My disposable attitude
Yeah.
ensured that I had to start from the bottom.
Yeah. I literally, when I came home from prison, I started off at a construction crew, high pressure washing the concrete because I had lost all my confidence. Life had beat me up and ground me down to the pulp. And I had seen horrible things in prison, stabbings, and just like people I think that were even at a worse place in their life than I was, had little to lose. And I do realize like I could become a worse person. And that really terrified me. I saw people who would spit in officers' faces, um, stab each other. They're just, you just don't know how short people's fuses are. And it really saddened me because they could, like, when they're not in that state of mind, they were actually really, you could talk and have a pleasant conversation with them. They were really pleasant people. But when they felt cornered, used, abused, they just turned into animals. And that was a culture where it was sort of okay to be that way. Like, you just do you. So that was really tough to.
Do you think there's how I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question. How do you identify that? Like, I guess I can connect with the thought of, you know, recognizing where you're at that time and not making this wrong decision, right?
Mhm.
Not making this silly gesture of, you know, violence or anger towards somebody. But did you recognize that at the time, or or is this kind of something that you are able to look back on and realize that
Mhm.
it was, you know, you were, you know, by the grace of God or whatever it might be, that you just didn't make the wrong decisions at the wrong time, or is there any way you can identify that and kind of, uh, you know, bookmark it to be able to say, you know, okay, I'm putting myself in a bad situation here, and being able to back yourself out of that. Because I think that was one of the things that I've struggled with through my life is, up until the point that I tried to actively acknowledge and see when I'm making a bad decision.
Mhm. That's a really good question. And I think that there were people, as much as my life sucked, there were people who were trying to intervene, who were trying to bring me up short. And I just thought they had bad intentions. looking back at it now, I'm like, they were really trying to put their whole body in front of me and say, stop being so crazy. Stop trying. And I tell you another thing that we don't like, I think people like us, we don't like silence. We don't like to be still. And prison made me sit still for hours and hours and just, and I learned how to self-reflect. Yeah, and I think I did do that. Like when I was at the club, I'm like, I am processing life. You know, I got 99 problems. And I'm like, yeah, like, and my mind is going like that. But I do think that silence said, there has to be a path forward that is better than. And so I would say in that is like, I had to search out men who were good, because there is that tendency, I think, from where I came from, where it's like, ooh, he really has a lot of violence and he's really macho. I really want to be around him because people fear him, or they respect. You have a street cred. Yeah. There you go.
Some air of respect there,
Yes.
but it's not really respect.
It's
not. Just fear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I realized, and so I had to make that distinction between street cred, because I'm like, but that guy, he drives a Honda Civic and like doesn't even have a place to lay his head except his grandma's basement. Like, he's not really because the Mennonite people, they did show you what success was and what hard work was. They did take care of yourself, take care of your community. These people were super selfish. And I really hated that about them, because I'm like, if you are that G that has the stacks, why are you so miserable? Why can't you make a $3,000 bond? Why are you here with me? So like those were things like I'm just like you gotta think through these things. Like, can't you see it? But I was just looking at it from someone who had never been on the streets, you know, living a very sheltered life. So
the allowance of self-reflection.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely. I still do that. The silence, though, sometimes can be scary, overwhelming, because some of the conclusions you draw, you realize I'm going to have to go out here and do things I've never done before. I have to tell my daughters every day that I love them. I didn't hear that once from my father. My dad, my mom, I heard it occasionally in a prayer or something condescending. Mm-hmm. God, pray that he would realize our love or something like that.
Like it's your fault.
Yeah. Like, and I think like that was really hard. So I'm like, what do I want in my daughters? Well, I want them to know that I think, like I say, what could have made me a healthy person? To know that I was loved. That ultimately. And so I have to go get on my knees and like, do you know that daddy loves you? You have to know that, right? You have to know above all else, I'm not always going to be with you, but just know that you were loved. And they don't know that. They're 6 years old. They're 6 years old and 19-month-old. But like early start that process. And then out of that, I don't know what that reaction is. Sometimes that reaction is really like, I still want to watch my movie, Dad.
Yeah, Dad, I
just gotta watch the movie. They don't get it, but when you don't have it, like you still keep at it.
Yeah. It's funny. This morning I mentioned, I took my daughter hunting. It's her first year. So I learned hunting from my in-laws. And it struck me. It's 16 degrees. We're sitting in a tree stand, and I like to go bow hunting, and I like to sit there and it's just me, right? It's just me and the woods, maybe some annoying squirrels when I'm waiting for like the moment that I'm really waiting for. And it's just this peace and quiet, that it took quite a while to get comfortable with that. And then it really struck me this morning. We've gone a couple times this year, but sitting next to her in this tree stand, I'm like, it's not just me. And it was one of the most uncomfortable moments I've ever had hunting, because it was like this realization, like, oh, it's not just me. I don't know why I'm so uncomfortable having my daughter here. because it's that realization of like, this isn't just me.
No, absolutely
And
not.
it's like, oh,
Is it partially the fact that maybe if she didn't have a good experience, you felt responsible in the back of your mind, or something different?
no, I think it's more of a fear of. I think it was a fear of her feeling alone in the moment.
No.
More existential.
Yeah, like it's like this isn't just about me. Like this is like it's something like I've never experienced it from her end necessarily, but it was like, oh, like this isn't just about me anymore.
I think one
You
of
know,
the I think back at like what did I, if I could have had the verbiage to look at my dad and say, this is what I want from you.
Mm.
He took care of us financially. He bought me my first car. He opened doors for me. But if I could have looked at my dad and said, just stop. All I want is your time. That's all I want. All I want. And so you say, okay, ooh, I have to look at myself and say, all they want is my time.
Yeah.
We don't build pyramids to ourselves anymore. But what we do is send children out into the world that are part of 50% of my daughter is me. What am I going to put out into the world? Is it going to be a good wife? Hopefully. Is it going to be, a doctor that who can change thousands of people's lives? It could be just a school teacher. Do you know what I mean? Like not everyone's better or worse. It just is. And I think like that realization really puts it on my shoulders. Like, what kind of environment am I making at my home? I go to church. What kind of people am I surrounding her with? Because these are going to really affect her in the future. So I think of that constantly, that is my responsibility.
Yeah, and it's at one. I almost see it as like a blessing and a curse all at the same time. If you have lived a life that a lot of people have problems with their parents or their family, and they have all these struggles and strifes and whatever it may be. But if it's what kind of life do you want to provide for your kids versus what you had? And it's really, I guess I use the word easy, but parenting I don't think is ever easy, but it seems easy. It's apparently easy if you've had a really good upbringing with in a really great community with all these great people around you. It's apparently easy. It's like, well, I just do the same thing that generations have done before me. No big deal. Whatever. It's going to be great. No problem. But without that, then that's the curse and the blessing part of it is, well, maybe I don't have any great examples of what I want, because the examples I had weren't necessarily what I want to pass forward. But also, I use the kind of metaphor that when I had a kind of a life awakening in my mid to late 20s, and I realized, and I say it in a way that I don't think a lot of people necessarily exactly understand what I mean by it. But when I finally realized like the universe necessarily, it's not pointed directly at me. It doesn't revolve around me. It doesn't necessarily care what happens to me because it's just going to continue to do what it's going to do. But in my mind, I realized that now that nothing, quote unquote, nothing really matters, now I can change and make my life into something that matters for me and the people around me, because I don't have this, I'm not beholden to something. So like, there's like this blank slate sometimes of, all right, maybe you didn't have this example that you need to follow. And, my dad was a doctor and his grandpa was his dad was a doctor or a farmer or whatever it might be. So I have to be this thing. And then I have to teach my kids how to be this thing. And we always have to do this thing. Well, it's when you have a blank slate, it can be rough because where do I go from here? Like, how do I instill the qualities and the hard lessons in life to my kids without necessarily knowing how I learned them.
I think
So it's now you got a blank slate. So that's exciting, but kind of terrifying all at the same time. like how do we move forward from here?
I think that one of the greatest things that ever happened in my life is I liked cars. I mean, I'm a '90s kid, and so I always did. If I had to doing something with cars all the time, it just made me happy. And when I came out of prison, I met a guy. He was a traveling evangelist, which I didn't even know that such a thing existed. And I don't know why, but I asked him if I could change the oil in his car. And he said, sure. And I was broke. I was super broke, but I went and got the oil, changed the oil in his car. And he was so grateful for that. And I'm like, maybe this is a guy that I would like to be like. Just, he made me feel good. And he accepted what I gave him.
Mm.
And he didn't want any more. He was like, thank you very much. And I said, dude, but I got to tell you, I said, I'm going to this church and I'm super nervous because I think these are good people and I'm not a good person.
Mm.
I have a rough past. And he's like, oh, don't worry about that. He's like, me too. And I was like, what? You? And he's like, yeah. He said, I was that kid, and I was really blown away that someone who had a rough past could have that look in his eye of stability. And when he looked at his wife, of respect, and just wasn't grinding her into the ground because he had a rough life, just visiting that pain everywhere he went.
Mm.
And I thought, whoa, maybe we're supposed to meet. Anyway, he said, come back tomorrow. And he sits down and he starts going off and he's like, and I feel like God was pursuing me, even in prison. There was this, I was fascinated with the person of Christ. I had Sunday school right there on the edge of that railing. And they would teach me about Jesus. And I was like, a God that cares about and that knows my name.
Yeah.
Why didn't he stop the pain?
Mm.
Why didn't he send in angels to intervene? Then I hated God. And this guy, he sits down with me and he says, but in prison, there were these things that would just happen that I would be like, that didn't have to happen. And I'll give you a perfect example. We were in North Carolina. It was so hot. They had no AC. You were just a prisoner, an inmate. And they didn't care. And they had these giant fans on the wall. And everybody's wanted to sleep on the bottom bunk where this 46-inch fan was. But they were, there wasn't very many of them. I think they had a half a dozen fans in there. And so I go to this, we were down in Whiteville, North Carolina, right on the coast. I mean, people were passing out. It was so hot. And I'm like, so now I got to so I'm angry. I'm like, I got to do time in North Carolina where it's 100 degrees, 90% humidity, just angry. So I walk in there and they assign me a bunk and it's right under this fan. And I'm like, maybe God does know who I am. If there's a God, thank you very much right now. Because there was actually somebody laying in there and I'm like, excuse me, sir. This is my bunk assignment, and I know, but it's so hot. And I'm like, I thought maybe he wanted to fight me for the bunk, and I'm like, I'm just not that guy. He want the bunk, but he wasn't. He's just give me a couple minutes. I'm hot, and I said, okay, fine. So I feel like there was always these sparkling pieces of crystal that were always it could be a coincidence, or it could be somebody who's like, I really care about you. So I'm changing this guy's oil. I come back the next day. And he said, do you know God? And I thought, no, I don't know God. And he said, do you want to talk to God? And he said, look, God is this person that you can talk to, just like, and we were talking smack. He was talking about he had a drug history past. This is a really cool story. And he just came out of that, and he's a preaching evangelist now. And he said, God's a person that you can talk to, just like we're talking like right now. And I don't know, there was this freeing moment where I'm like, I believe that. I truly believe that. And if I believe it, I'm going to act on it. And if nothing in my life changes, all this horror will continue. But if it's true, and there is redemption, I want to go towards that. And he said something very specific. He said, do you want to talk to God? Oh, no, he said, do you have some things you want to talk to God about? And I'm like, do I ever?
yeah, put them on the line. I got a couple items I've been writing down.
I just want to talk to God about some things. And I feel like that's what changed my life. I started on a path. It was a very broken path where I just said, okay, I'm going to seek out, like the Bible says, like a hid treasure. And I'm going to find out what it means that a God came from heaven, Jesus, died for me, because I sure needed it. I was really on the wrong path. But if it's true that he knew that I needed redemption in that, what if it is true? I didn't know if it was true, but I had that just that little bit of faith. I said, I trust that what you're saying is true, and I'm going to talk to God. And I don't even know what I said, but in my heart, I'm like I'm going to just give it. I'm going to give you what all this is here that I can't even speak. I'm going to give it over to that God. And it was this slow, it was no unicorns and rainbows at all. But what it did do, I feel like that when that happened in my heart, there was my conscience was awakened, and I'm like, that's a path I shouldn't go down. Those feelings that I have of bitterness and resentment, man, you really need, those are really dark places in your heart, like peeling an onion.
Eat at your soul.
Yeah, you got to deal with that. So I met this woman, she's an ex-Amish girl. My first job out of prison was a construction job, which I absolutely hated. And then in the wintertime, he couldn't employ me. So I got my CDLs and I started delivering mini barns. So just put these little mini barns in back of people's houses. He's giving me $900 a week to do that, which I thought was for real bread. And I go to this one house, and this guy comes out, and he's like, do you go to such and such church? And I'm like, yeah. I was a little embarrassed because I'm like, I don't know. I don't know who those people are. That's where I'm at, though. Yeah. And he's like, hey, I have some he said, eligible dating age daughters and some single girls that are going to my church. And maybe you would like to meet them. And I'm like, I'm broke. I'm a felon. You have freaking no idea.
Yeah, I don't think you want me to meet them.
Yeah, exactly. But it was it made me really curious, because I'm like, maybe there's some girls up in the mountains here that would like to meet a Spanish guy. I don't know. So I did. And in that journey, I ended up meeting my wife. She was not impressed at all. People were egging her on. And what I didn't know in her life, she always wanted to marry a Spanish guy, someone who was non-white, and I'm like, so I had no idea all these things that were happening. And so we ended up getting married almost 2 years later, and that was not easy. But she looked at me, and she was the one that probably was able to probably just look at me and find the language to say, you're really broken and I can't help you, but I believe in you, that you can find healing. And she said, I'm going to find the best psychiatrist in the area, and I want you to go. And I said, okay, if I don't know how somebody could help me, but if they have the skills to do that, that would be fascinating.
Right.
And I started going, and I went for like 2 years, and that was like the best thing that ever happened. Just, man, he just dug, and he was a PhD in psychology, and he had written a thesis on the Iran-Contra conflict.
Hmm.
And he said, I got to tell you, he said, you're the only person I ever met that went through this conflict, but I know what you went through. And I'm like, of all the people in the whole world to have known what I went through, it was my psychiatrist, because he had written his thesis on it.
Or at least educationally
Yeah,
wise, huh?
exactly.
What was it about him or your experiences with that person that unlocked what it was that you needed? Because I think there's a lot of times where, people talking about things is great, and sitting down with somebody that's a professional about talking about things can be great. But sometimes it seems that, sitting down with, a psychiatrist or somebody that wants you to talk about your problems all the time, some people kind of almost get more involved in their problems instead of trying to solve them. I've had a couple experiences where talking to people where they gave me advice and in a psychiatrist type way that it was like, yeah, right. And then, 3, 5, 6 months later, I'm like, okay, they were right. And it adds that next little, unlocks that next door for me. What was it about that experience that helped, open that next door for you, I guess? Because it seems like there was like another door open for you there.
Well, I realized I just couldn't handle it. Like, I was suffering from PTSD. I would wake up in the middle of the night, just shaking, terrors. And I'm not sure what it was about, or maybe it always happened and I didn't realize it. But my wife was like, I can't help you do that. I can't help you deal with this. So just the confidence that he knew what the heck he was talking about, and that there was like goodwill in his eyes. Like I want you, like, he's like, I don't want you to come here forever. Which I thought was really
I don't
important.
want you to keep giving me your money.
Yeah, exactly. He actually was like,
you.
I can help you. Yeah. And that there was like a real vote of confidence in that, where I'm like, maybe I'm not that screwed up. Maybe I can find my way. So, and then also he helped my wife be able to bring up certain issues, how to, just the way I needed to hear it, instead of, like, a lot of it was accusatory, like language, like, why do you always leave your socks on the couch? It's more like, can you just pick up your socks on the couch? It's two different things, but it triggers something different. And so I give credit, 100% credit to my wife, who was able to do and find that language that was just not condescending and not like in your face, but like kind and like inviting to change. And what's really sad, I think too, for the first time in my life, like what I said was valued. That someone believed me. For the first time in my 30s, somebody looked at me and said, I believe you. What you think and what you're saying is the most important thing right now, and you're heard. And it did something to my soul, and that, and like, as my wife was an amazing lady. She was 30 years old. I don't think she would mind she was a virgin at 30 when I married her. I was not at 27. And I often wondered, like, what the heck is she doing? Like, she's a high value girl, and I'm not that high value of a guy. And I asked her, like, what is this? Like, what are you doing? You have to know. And she's like, no, 100%. I believe in you. And I still, to this day, I said, why did you do it? And she said, because I saw who you could be. And I thought, that's a heck of a bet, girl. Like,
there's something special about
yeah,
it, right?
but
when
she
you have someone that believes in you.
She did, 100%. So with that, and then, so as we started this journey of going to church together, she was raised in the Amish community. She had her particular challenges,
I'm sure.
like because they weren't born into it. Her parents joined it,
Oh,
and so
really?
there was yeah. And sometime you might have to interview her, but like
Yeah, that's a
she,
whole different thing.
yeah. So she had identity things to work through, and I felt like we understood each other fundamentally, like what we were. And so, you know, to be honest with you, you know, you're on this path, and you think like I'm going like what I'm thinking is correct. I'm looking at the Bible. I'm like I came from an intellectual point of view. There has to be an intellectual, logical cohesiveness to my faith. I need to know. So there was like years where I was in that phase, and then like the faith part that psychologists and psychiatrists, if they're smart, they don't ever go into the theological. And I respect that because I feel like that is a really personal thing for me to have gone into that theological space and say, why am I here? All this crap that happened, what did it mean? Am I just floating through space? I'm going to be a vapor and disappear in 50 years and no one would have ever known? That seems really demoralizing. Where do values come from? Is there good and evil? My grandfather was a World War II vet. He never talked about what he experienced in the Pacific Islands. He was a very spiritual man, though. I really admire my grandfather. He held it all in. I mean, we would go to visit him, and he might say 50 words in a weekend that he served his country with great pride. And so there was a lot of things.
Wait,
like,
can I interrupt
yeah, go ahead.
a second? Babe, this is not. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
I
no, that's good. Yeah, we don't want
wanted to not catch.
we don't want to miss anything for sure.
Okay.
But no, I think we're good. No, sometimes you know what technological issues happen and things just don't work. We've had that before too, where like it'll be hour, 2 hours in, and it just go click and nothing.
I've also
like-
not hit record. before.
We've done that before.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
I've done that before, and it's like, oh no,
yeah.
yeah. So no, I think we're good. But sorry, you're.
No, my grandfather was he was a religious man. And so I thought, well, maybe I could learn something from him. You know, what is it that gets him up in the morning after all that he witnessed what makes him get up, and
That's a
what
good
makes him
question.
have a good day or a bad day?
Yeah.
Just these deep, like I was so curious. Like there's fundamentally something different about people who have that light inside of them. And so there was always this constant like prayer in my heart, like I hope I can stay on the path. I hope that it's revealed to me what faith is. I can pass it on to my children, that I'm not always going to be there for my kids, but that I could put this sword in their hand, the spiritual sword, to like combat the hard things that I won't be there for. And that was really difficult because we did, I thought, I found Jesus. I have my wife. We have our life. We have decent money. We have built the American dream. We've arrived. Sailing till, flower, we'll have flowers until we're dead. That's what I was hoping for.
Yeah, I don't think it works out like that.
And, we have 5 miscarriages. And I don't think that there was much in my life, even though I suffered a lot, that was more difficult than watching my wife be pregnant. And then 11 weeks, they're just like, there was, it's, doctors aren't psychologists. They're just like, there's no heartbeat. And just those questions and DNC, like hanging over your head and just that, like all of it. And I'm like, what does this mean?
The shattering of hope.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Is there a spiritual person who really would visit this pain on me for sheer like torture? That was really demoralizing. Or did I screw up that bad that it was my fault?
Yeah, how is this my fault, right?
It was, and I really took it personal. I really did. And there was a crisis of faith. And, then it happened, and I'm like, well, maybe it was a one-off. It was a one-off. And it happened again, and I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I just feel all this, like, this just anger. And I'm like, I'm watching my wife go from, like, baby shoes and baby clothes and all that to, like, this ain't happening. And then, we had our oldest is 6 now, and just like every doctor visit, I'm like, so how cruel would it be at, instead of 11 weeks, we're like at 6 months, and just like the mental anguish. And I'm like, is there a spiritual person that controls this, that is really in it for me? I mean, like that really has it against me like that. And then we had the first baby, and I'm like, I don't know. And then we had 5, and so shattering. It was so shattering that we couldn't even talk about it between us. Like, I was so angry watching my wife go from a good woman to being old, and she became old in her heart by watching her just like experience this tremendous. And there was just, I had no idea. I was dealing with all my crap, prison, trying to have a stable life, to like, I didn't even know that people experienced and what that meant on this end of it. And that was really like hard, because I'm like, why is no one talking about this? Why has no one in my friends group come and say, hey, Don, there's this such thing called a miscarriage, and it's probably the hardest thing you ever, like, I wish somebody would have given me a clue. And my wife, like, I had no words. And at that time I was like going through the intellectual like part of like my faith journey, and I had nothing. And I felt like I should have gone to like the heart thing.
Yeah, waiting for the other shoe to drop, basically.
I had nothing. And she would come to me and she'd say, what do you think? And she really wanted me to say like something that would bring a comfort to her heart. And I was just so angry. I just went right back into like that felony conviction guy, just so angry. And that wasn't helpful. I guarantee you, it was not helpful.
I believe that.
And one day, it was really personal, but she came to me and she said, I think we need to pray. I'm like, I think so. I think we do need to pray. It's not going to, to me, it's like, it's not going to help. It's not going to bring back any of this, right? But maybe she needs that. Maybe she needs to hear me pray. And then she looked at me and she was just hope in her eye. And she said, I have a prayer that I want to pray, that God would hold our baby tonight in heaven. And I thought, it helped me in that moment to heal too, because I realized that's what love is. That's what nurturing is. That's what a good person wants, is even a good mother who never held a baby in her arms wants to hold, nurture, comfort. And I thought, I want to be that person. I want to be that game changer in the world that can love people, be impactful, because she has no idea, because she had a good life, how, I think she does now, like she didn't know how pivotal or how life-changing it would be to just have someone behind them like that would love them in spite of all this. And so there was that journey. I felt like that was a really pivotal journey in our, where we were like drawn together through pain. And I feel like that happens constantly in our marriage, where hard things come up and we're like, yeah, but we've gone through this before.
Yeah.
We got this. And it makes you ask the hard questions. And I think that's what God does. I think God pursues us through the hard things in life. I truly believe that you can ignore it. But if you read the Bible, the stories in the Bible are always about people who resisted God. And God never really forced himself on people. But he was just always there, just like Here I am. Here I am. Do you want to turn? No. Here you go. Here you go. But he's a gentleman like that. And I don't think anybody ever tells people like Moses. I love Moses in the Bible. I don't know if you know anything about the Bible story. I love
I've
Moses.
read the King James version a
Yeah.
few times myself.
I
so.
love the story of Moses. You know, he's adopted. He's in the king's palace. And he looks out and he's like, those are my people. But they're getting treated like crap.
Yeah.
I need to do something. And I think about that even now with my people, the Latino people. I'm like, they're getting treated like crap. They're mistreated. People use them, abuse them. What can I do? Can I, what I didn't tell you is that I have brothers who weren't adopted, so they came here illegally, and just how that affects their status and how they get paid and all that. And it just feels like so much of my life has been this like, I'm going to do something. But in my past life, it's just like, here it is, just everybody screwing each other. It's like, where's the good? I desperately need to find good. And so it's been a real long journey. I'm 38 years old, but I feel like, man, I've lived like 3 lifetimes. And now I have my friend Chris, who's really helped me, be a real true friend, help me work out, get my arms a little bigger. And yeah, but desperately like searching for male figures. And they're few and far in between, unfortunately, who you can look up to and say the hard questions. Like, we're not talking right now at home. How do you think I could come back? And just be humble enough to just, and also that safety and like that. I know Chris isn't going to go like put that on Facebook, Don and his wife, you know what I mean? Like there's this like confidence that, man, he's there for me,
Yeah, there's at least I've personally found it in my life. There's the whole manliness conversation and this aura of like what a man is, and masculinity in this particularly talk about toxic masculinity and all these different things, where there's this balance in nature and in humans, that I've found that it's being able to show love for somebody and being confident in yourself enough to communicate with somebody on a level that it might not be all flowers and frilly and very nice, but there's still a level of like showing somebody appreciation and love and directness, and still being able to do it nicely and with compassion.
Yes.
And particularly when we talk about like guys, like guys are rough, right?
They're uncivilized.
Yeah, uncivilized. But if you can be uncivilized in a civilized manner with your friends, enough to like, to me, I think the biggest show of masculine love and energy would be being able to call a brother out strongly with compassion and love, and then being able to receive that. Honestly, being able to receive that might even be a little harder, but understanding that this is a guy that, or a father or a brother or whatever it may be, a friend they're pointing out what I already know, and they're just showing it to me, and I'm not going to be upset with them. It's self-realization. Like, okay, I hear you, brother. You're right. And I guess like people are so afraid of confrontation, which confrontation is, can be very difficult, and honesty can be very difficult. But if it's done with love and, friendship tied to it, without that, oh, well, now I'm going to, like you said, I'm going to go share it on Facebook, or I'm going to tell somebody else about it, or I'm going to do like, no, it's one-on-one. It's this, hey, I trust you, I believe you, I love you, and you're screwing up right now.
I think
to have somebody to be able to do that, it's like, oh, okay.
I think that you can only do that. Personally, I think you can only do that if you built somebody up first.
Yeah.
And what men that I've seen, and I travel all over, I'm a truck driver and I travel all over, is that no one has encouraged men. No one has looked at men and said, you are amazing. You're killing it. Good for you. Good for you for overcoming extraordinarily difficult things in your life and pointing out the good. You're being a great father. You're getting it right in so many ways. You're killing it. But man, this one thing is so glaring. And because I love you, I'm gonna walk with you till you're in a good place. And I'm here for you.
I'm gonna walk with you.
No one ever says that to men. It's the most encouraging thing any man has ever told me. Is like, I'm here for you, Don.
I got you.
Yeah. I care enough about you.
That's one of the things I've seen in the relationships that you have where you mentor. I've seen you do that with others because you learned that and you know the value of saying, I'm going to walk with you because you've had people do that for you. So I learned from you just as much as you say you benefit. So thanks for being a great friend.
It's important
Yeah.
to, and I don't think, at least particularly with men, we find it difficult to find the words to make sense out of it all. But I think it's more through actions. Guys see that, right? I've seen that in my in-laws, where my father-in-law and his sons they're kind of rough characters on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
They're a little abrasive, but when you see the family interact over years and years and years, it's like, okay, this is just it's a surface thing that like some people just don't like the personalities or like the jokes or this, that, whatever. But it's when you boil it all down, if you don't have those people that I know people use it as a saying like, oh, if you had middle of the night, if you had to call somebody, who would you call? And I've never really had anybody like that, and then, but when you're able to see those people step up, and be a friend and walk with you in those times of, hey man, you're messing up right now, or, or when you need help, truly, to be able to have those people and recognize those people, so I guess a lot of people say what they want, but like I've tried my best in the last, I guess maybe decade of understanding that and recognizing it and telling those people like, hey, like it's probably, once a year or so, I'll text my brother and I'll be like, you're more of a brother or anything or a friend than I've ever had my entire life. And I appreciate you and I love you. Like how often do you, send a message like that to a friend? Like, hey, I appreciate you. They're like, well, what's wrong? Nothing. I just thought about you. Yeah. And I realized that you're walking with me. We might not have talked for a month, but I know you're walking with me.
I saw that so much in prison. And in fact, I missed it. You would have these men who would go into deep depressions, missing their kids, grandkids, and they would literally just lay on their bunks months and months on end. And it broke my heart because they weren't going anywhere. And I feel like that was my proving grounds to go over and say, man, let me sit at your bunk. What's going on today? And, oh, got a piece of mail. See a correctional officer, made me feel a certain way. And I had to do that month in, month out. And I realized these men, they like this because they like this environment in a way, because it's always, we wake up in the morning, good morning, Don. And I'll be like, wait, we slept in the same dorm together, but it was always this like civility and this appreciation and just this reinforcement. In the Latino community, you would, shake hands every morning with Jose, and be like, what's going on? I'm like, we just did this yesterday, but there was this camaraderie that I've never seen before, but we're doing time together. And I realized like, wow, we are really failing men as men. Like, and one of the things I see this a lot in my travels. I'll go to I deliver furniture, and you go to the warehouse. It's heavy furniture. It's Amish made furniture, and the first thing you might hear from people who are not very motivated to help you might be like, "How much you got today?" They'd be like, "There's a choice right there, right?" And I used to be like, "Why is he? What's wrong with me that he feels okay talking to me in that tone of voice? What is it about me? Do I really show that low self-esteem and that low self-confidence that he feels like he can just, you know, do that?" And I realized, like, no, he's just trying to see who I am. What am I made of? And it's really disarming for men to look at them in the face and say, "Good morning, sir. How is your morning going?" And that's a choice to be a complete butt or to be civil, at the very
Yeah.
minimum, civil. And then you say, "Well, why are they so angry?" And you just say, "Well, just look, observe. They've been in a warehouse for 15 years. Whatever reason, that you don't go very high in a warehouse. You know, the ladder's pretty low. It the pay is pretty low, but if you put in extra hours, you probably have a pretty decent life. But somehow something inside of them hasn't said, I got to go out there and get new skills or whatever. They're just really low skill jobs, and life's beating them up. You know, they wish they had more money, and they know that truck drivers make decent money, so they look at me like, "Well, you're probably doing really well right now, Don, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yes, but I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, I'm putting in 17-hour days, but I know that no one's going to give it to me. But I'm motivated because I've seen hell, and I don't want to go back to that. I want better for my family. So I do feel like there's that motivation there that gets me up, that is a little different than some people.
You know, it's interacting with people is funny. Because I worked a job that I would interact with the public frequently through utilities, and my job was essentially to go to talk to angry people. That's basically what I what I found was, it doesn't matter how old they are or how rich they are, how much, it doesn't matter if it's, I walked up on a $30,000 house or a $3 million house. Those people can be some of the nicest, most gracious, welcoming people you've ever met, or not. And it always blew my mind, particularly as they got older. You know, I'd go and talk to these, 70, 80-year-old people, and they just be so angry before I ever even talked to them. And there's this, I guess to me, it gave me an understanding of, their life is essentially, it's whatever you make it.
Yeah.
Right. And so why is this person so angry with me today?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And one of the most impactful things that I've noticed, particularly with men when they're angry, is the understanding, showing, listen to them, hear them complain, understand I understand where you're coming from. I get it. I do. And instantly it's that disarming, right? It's like, how are you doing today? I get it, man. I hear you. I had a bad morning too. And then it's that acceptance of, I'm going to meet you where you're at, but we're going to talk through this. And I think we can do this together. Let's talk this out. And without that, some people are a little more difficult than others. Obviously, some people's situations are a little more difficult. But to your point, it's that just accepting those people and disarming them of, hey man, I'm not the enemy here.
Yeah.
I'm here to talk to you.
Yeah.
Can we talk? Let's do that. And it was, it's across the board. I've seen from people from all different spectrums where it's sometimes just connecting with somebody and giving them a moment to be a human. Is just mind-blowing.
I think people are uptight a lot of times because no one listens to what the heck they're trying to say.
Yeah. Listen.
No one's listening, really listening. Or they feel like they're being used, or they're just putting in that time till retirement. And I've as I travel across America, I've had some of the greatest conversations. I'm going to be getting off the road here in a couple months, and I'm going to miss going from Connecticut to Wisconsin and just sitting down with people and just look at them and say, how's your kids? Like, do you have a family? And I just talked to a guy the other day, complete stranger at Carrabba's. And I said, do you have a family? And his tears just started running down his face. And he's talking about his son, who's a chef and a seafood chef. And he's just like tearing up, and like, no one listens to this man. And so I think we've done a huge disservice to men to not be able to have built them up. And even macho men, like, what are you doing? I'll call all macho men out. Like, find the words to look at your little boy and say, you're killing it, dude. Way to go. Way to listen to mom and dad, or young men. In dating relationships and all that, like, call out the men, call out the boys. You didn't respect her last night, or, I heard you could have done better, and just establish in that long-term relationships is what we're missing. And the articulation to just look at men and just build them up constantly. And my wife has she's learned a lot, and being able to, and I would say I benefited greatly from her finding the language to say, thanks for providing a good life for us, but your family needs you right now. Mm-hmm. That's really like, okay, it brings me time. It's not condescending. It's actually really kind, where she can like support what I'm doing. But say, you got to do a little better.
Your wife, oh, my mic's not
Turn it on.
Your wife sounds like a gem. And you said that men are failing men, but I also think society allows women to fail men because there's this ick to a man being vulnerable. And there's this thought process and this education that women have to be strong and they can't support their man having feelings and being the way that he is. And it's disgusting. So I don't know if it's the way that she was brought up or how she was allowed to like give you that space. But she sounds amazing. Yeah, so it's hard because as women, we're not like, I'll get made fun of for the respect and reverence that I want to show him from like, and we're not in like a Christian faith, but we were for years. And it was a weird, because we were early 20s when we were very young, when we were married. And I was taught this reverence for him and this respect for him. But there was also like this underlying, like, you also have to be a doormat that just came with the type of religion that we were a part of. And I think a lot of women don't want to be a part of that. So they go so far to the other way. And the fact that she even learned a language to express her needs for you is huge, instead of just beating you down and telling you to like pick up your friggin' socks. Yeah. Like, that's just, I know you like sang her praises, but it is difficult for a woman in society to show that respect and allow a man to have space. So it's not just men failing men. I think that it's women as well failing men.
I think that women have to ask themselves, what do you want? What do you want in a relationship? Do you want a bunch of beat down men who lash out, who are hard to live with? Or would you want men who are appreciated, build up, and that you can be a part of that healing journey? Because I think we're pretty basic as men. Just tell us we're doing a good job and that we're killing it once every 6 months, minimum. And we'll remember that forever.
And it's like you've made a ton of points that through those, your relationship with your wife that I can resonate with, because it's, being married, particularly as a man, myself, it's simple, but at the same time, it can be so complicated when you are, everyone's got their own lives. Everyone's got their own concerns. They have their own problems and their own anger issues and this, that, whatever they're trying to deal with. And, when you are entering a relationship like that, it's, I guess it's kind of like the sitting there with my daughter this morning. Oh, it's no longer just me.
That's right.
Right. And then when your wife is able to recognize that as well and be able to enter those difficult moments and conversations and in with the right tone and the right, attitude and that capability of looking at each other and saying, naturally the encouragement piece is very helpful all the time. But those moments where it's, hey, things aren't going well right now, but I believe in you. We can get through this. We can get through this, but it's a we, right? It's got to be both ways. It can't just be one person holding up the other all the time.
Right.
We've heard it discussed, and I think we've talked about quite a bit. It's, a relationship is never always 50-50. Sometimes it's 60-40. Sometimes it's 70-30. Sometimes it's 95-5. But if you're willing and able to fluctuate with that and work together to be able to do that, that's where, it's when I know you need 90% today. All right, I'll step up.
Yeah.
I'll give you 90% today.
Yeah.
But there's some days where I wake up and it's, I'm running at 10% today. I'm going to need 90. I'm going to need 90 from you today. Right. And being able to do that and having those honest conversations, you don't have to be a jerk, to be honest. Right. Like you mentioned some of those times, it's, hey, we can do this. I believe in you. Those three little words can mean a lot, especially to at least for me, especially to a man. I believe in you.
Yeah.
I believe you can do this. It's like, what? You do? Because I'm really trying to convince myself over here because I don't know if I believe I can do it. But, well, if you believe I can do it, okay, maybe I can.
I think that makes me sometimes just go like, who are the men that I admire the most in my life? I'm going to give them a buzz. And I have a man who's walked with me for 14 years now. He's been married 30 plus years. And you think like 30 years, it would just be this easy peasy. But it's not. Like he's one of the things that he says that just gives me a lot of confidence in myself. I'll call him and be like, dude, you can't believe what I just did. I need somebody to talk to. And he's like, what do you got? I need you to be a dad today to me. And he's like, what? And he's like, and I'll tell him. And he'll say, you're normal. You're normal. If you think you're the only guy that did this to his wife or acted this way or acted out this way, no, you're normal. We all do this. And I think like, I just always wanted to be normal. I never wanted to be different. If everyone's doing this, the bigger thing, the bigger man is going to look and say, if I screwed it up, how do I fix it? Is it a simple? And for me, the most difficult the difficult words in the human language are, I'm sorry. It has evaded me. It's been a source of contention in our marriage. I never had a dad who said that. I never had people in my life who said that. It was just always like, I guess I was wrong, but yeah. So I feel like that really hurts like relationships where I'm wrong. I was completely wrong in that, or I didn't know.
So for me, it sounds like one of the things from my experience with you that's made a difference is your network, your support network, the relationships you have. What would you say to someone that doesn't have that network and they say, you know what, I need to see if I can develop a network where I can go to people? What would you say to that person?
Man, that's a really good question, because I think in my life I yearned for that. And I'm like, where are the good men? I remember thinking that in my heart. Where are good men? And not like old men, but there's got to be good men who are fighting this fight. And so I have great sympathy for people who are in that boat. But the first thing I would ask is, how's it working for you being that alpha male? Are you really happy? Um, are you living a rich life being uh, this macho guy? And if not, then you need more information. And that's an invitation for change, but also an invitation to seek out, like, and I do this all the time. I'm like, who are men that I admire most? And you got to find them. That's all the difference. That's made all the difference in the world to me.
Finding, if you're not happy where you're at, find a new environment, right?
You have to.
I've heard it explained a couple different ways. Where I think one of my favorite is, you never want to be no one wants to be the dumbest person in a room,
Right.
But you also don't want to be the smartest, because either one of those, you're not growing, right? So you have to find some kind of community. To your point, Chris, like, you have to find some kind of group of people that is encouraging you. I think one of the biggest things I've noticed over the past couple of years is I have a particular friend that has reached out to me a couple of times that, and I hesitate to do this, but just because of who I am, is he calls me every once, I don't know, maybe once every couple months, and just basically tells me how much he appreciates me and how much the guidance and the discussions that we've had together have encouraged him and, like, guided him, and how much they've changed his life. And it just blows me away every time. And what I realized, it was like, I was just trying to be a friend to you. I was trying, you were in a similar situation, that when, I tried to be the person that I'd be looking for.
Yeah.
I was trying to be the change that I wanted to see. And it just so happened our paths crossed at this particular time, that I was trying to be the change, and I was a catalyst to him. And it was just like, and every single time he mentions it, it's like, okay, I can't stop.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I want to be the change for somebody,
Mm-hmm.
while I'm still looking for the change in somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm still looking for my leader, right? Or my brother I can tag on to and grab strength from, and get some wise words or anything from, like, and I think to me, it's, you never want to be one or the other. I want to be all of that, all at the same time, to different people. I love being a leader is cool, but I don't want to be a leader all the time. That's exhausting. So I want to find a leader, and then I want to be a leader of someone else. And then maybe a year or two down the road, we can change positions.
Yeah.
It's like a good dog pack.
Yeah.
The leader, it's not always the same dog. Sometimes those dogs, they switch them out and they put someone else in front.
Well, you mentioned your friend that messaged you, like, his gratitude, and I'm assuming I know who that is. And it's funny because he's definitely one of the top 3 people I would call in the middle of the night if you needed help.
Yeah, if I was in trouble, he would be one of the people that I would look to.
Top 3, 100%. So, like, he did take on that role. He became the same for you, or at least for me as your wife, like a friend for you that I would, like, top 3.
And that was one of the lessons. It's like, you learn. It's like, oh, like, you don't always have to be on your game. If you're always trying to be on your game, all you're going to do is just get exhausted.
I think that you have to also realize that life is going to kick you in the butt at some point. And I know I buried my mother. She was 54. I was 21. I buried my adopted dad when I was 27. He was 60. And there were people who helped me fill up their graves, and who were there sitting on the couch when my mom was trying to struggle for breath. And those people have no idea the impact that they gave me, but they showed me what a real true friend is. They didn't have 5-syllable words or philosophy. They just showed up.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes when life is good and you live in an influential, affluent community, it's just me and the kids, and we're just gonna live our best life on our own. It's like, life is going to happen, and it doesn't take long. You're not going to be very old until something's going to hit you so hard in the face that it's going to make you ask questions. And then who are you going to call? And if you haven't invested, it is a very dark, lonely road. And that's why you see people fighting at their mother's graves and their father's graves over the inheritance. And I went through that. My dad, he had the business. He had married another woman, and all we're talking about is inheritance. And I'm just like, just give me one day to grieve. And so, yeah.
That's an interesting point. It makes me think, for the person of faith, you have this whole plethora of reasons why you want to build this network, and you want to be mentoring and you want to be mentored. But then in a practical sense, if you're not a person of faith, you can truly see that it would make sense to always have someone kind of showing you a path that they've taken, and you're learning from them, but then you're always kind of bringing someone under your wing. And it's sort of just the idea of, hey, if I continue to invest in people and seek people that can mentor and show me things that I don't know, then I'm going to be equipped to help people. It's a good thing for the world. And then, to take it a step further, if you're a person of faith, then you will believe that not only is it practical and beneficial here and now, but I believe there's a reward for that somewhere after this life. So I think, no matter where you are, I think that you can see the benefit of being vulnerable, and I think if I'm hearing correctly, it's like with your friend, you said, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. You were honest, you were open, you were vulnerable. And he said, wow, you're human too.
Yeah.
And you could share some things that were maybe a different place than where he is. And he's like, I can be honest with Fred because he's a real person. And he tells me things that are hard, difficult things in life. And so he has a sense of empathy and maybe could encourage me.
Yeah, it's that collective community, right? In a very practical sense, you look at a community, you have, you think about like an old school community, you have, you got a butcher, you have a tailor, you have, somebody who is a farmer. Well, we all need all of those things to make the whole thing work, and nobody can be all the things all at once, right? So you have to be open and honest with each other. You have to be able to provide different things at different times. And if you're not honest, like if you go to the farmer and you ask, you want some food, and he sells you a pair of shoes, well, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I needed from you. Like, what's this? Like, this isn't what you were trying to, like, this isn't what I asked from you. This is what I came to you for. Like, so it's this ridiculous metaphor, but, we're all capable of providing a lot of different things at different times. And it, to me, and through this podcast, honestly, is one of the things that I've seen from a community standpoint, that we need community. I was always a loner as a kid. Never, I had quote unquote friends and thought, like, oh, this is kind of what this is. This is what friendship is, and I always felt insecure about it because it was never honest. It was never open. I never understood, like, you can be vulnerable with people at the right time. Sometimes you don't want to be vulnerable with some people because they'll take advantage of that, right? There's those people. That's another thing too. You have to realize there's some evil out there.
Yes.
But if you can cultivate that community and realize that, hey, sometimes we need each other. A lot of times, we need to come together, and we need different things from different people, and to be able to support and build this whole awesome thing. Otherwise, being alone, it's a tough route.
I think probably one of the kindest things that was ever said to me from somebody who didn't know me was a judge. He looked at me and was like, he believed in me. I could see in his eyes. And he was sympathetic. I don't know that, the lawyers always tell you don't say anything when you go in court. It's a plea deal. You go in there and say, I'm guilty to this. And he looked at me and he said, you're young. There's a lot of life ahead of you, and it's not over. Like, no one has ever said that to me. No one has ever had that confidence. And I was not expecting it from a judge, but it meant all the it meant the world to me, because now as I look back at it, I'm like, what world does that judge want to live in? Does he want to live in around a bunch of ex-felons that are acting out every night, where they're going to be coming in to see him every 6 months on some crazy violent charges? Or would he really want men who are whole, built up, connected? Because that's what really matters at the end of the day. And so, yeah, we all need each other. In whatever sphere you find yourself, hopefully you can find those words that are life-giving to build each other up.
Yeah, we all have different gifts and talents. And I think one of the things that, I get motivated by is trying to help my kids discover what theirs are, exposing them to different things in music and art and sport, and challenging them to think about things differently. And, if there's anything I can do in this life that would give me a sense of accomplishment, it would be to know that, I've given my kids some skills, critical thinking ability to, look at things different ways, and to be able to make the right decision, and to use their gifts and talents through that to help other people. So it sounds like, the experience that we're working through now.
Yeah.
I think you just capped it off by those two last things you guys said. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your story, Don. I appreciate you coming, Chris. I know you weren't super excited the first time I ever tried to drag you on here.
I come for this guy right here.
Hey, I was like, you know what? I was like, I think I can get Chris on here. Tony was like, how'd you get Chris to agree to do this? I was like, I backed him into a corner. But I appreciate it. And, it's the more and more I meet gentlemen like you two, the more faith I have in humanity. I didn't have a whole lot growing up. I hated people. Blanket, just hated people. I was angry. There's a lot of people that have the right, quote unquote, the right to be angry, but how do you work your way out of that? Right. And I think, your story is a beautiful example, at least for me, of encouragement and light at the end of the tunnel for people, right? Like you can make a change, right? We all have that ability naturally. The more people you have, the community around you to be able to encourage you, or, that one-off chance of meeting that one person that says that one thing that goes, okay, I can do something better with my life. And I would encourage you to continue to tell your story. And Chris, you just keep on being who you are, because you guys are both just glowing, at least from what I can see in my life. And I really appreciate what you're doing and the encouragement, at least you've given me. And
Thanks for the opportunity to be with you, to hear your story. Thanks for hosting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know Tony sits back there in the corner, but I think that Tony is probably one of the best person at not networking, but like forming relationships. And it's weird because he just sits back there and he's quiet. But when you get to know Tony, like we only know Chris because of Tony.
True story. He's like a little shadow master.
Yeah, he is really great at opening and
honestly, there's
collecting people. And Tony so we love you, Tony.
Yes, right.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And Chris is the master of connections.
That's why we're all friends.
Yeah.
All the spider webs and networks coming together, and I appreciate it. And
we challenge each other to be better and explore new ideas and
absolutely
grow.
Hey, and this table is always open if you guys want to come back and do a part 2. Yeah. So.
Bring your wife next time. I'm going to interview your wife.
That'd be hard. That'd be
well, if Cass is here, maybe she'd be okay.
Yeah.
It would balance it out a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm here for it.
Maybe what I should do is just say we're gonna have a surprise date.
I don't know.
I do
In
not
front of a
recommend
microphone
that.
and camera, I'm not sure if I'd recommend. Yeah, but
No.
yeah, but hey, you know what? I've told people this too. It's hey, we can sit down and have a conversation, and if you don't want to go live, that's fine with me. To me, it's we. I guess I think I don't remember if we talked about it before we started recording or not, but this was just all in an effort to talk to people and sit down with people. And I made a transition through my life and kind of started growing, after my brain formed in my late 20s and I hit 30 and I was like, what's going on with my life? What am I doing? And then COVID hit, almost 5 years ago at this point. And it was like, we need to talk more. People need to sit down and just, because social media and all these things are like kicking off to where you see just this splintering in our society and our communities where it's almost kind of taboo to think about sitting down with a couple of people and just talking for 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
It might be taboo, but I think from what I've seen, people are desperate for it and they welcome it, especially if you can create that environment. I've had some of the best conversations, just impromptu, and it has really helped me it's therapeutic, to be honest with you. It's therapeutic. And then you say, I always ask, especially the older community, I say, you're married 30 years, I'm married 11 years. What's one thing you can give to me that will ensure 50 years of marriage? Because we still, as a society, say, if you're married a long time, that's a good thing. And just for example, it just gets the conversation going. And usually people are very eager to give you some kind of insight. And probably the best advice I got, by the way, while we're on that subject, is just to have a short memory about what happened before. Like, don't relitigate the past. And I'm like, easier said than done. But I think it's true. Like, to just, today's a new day. Anyway, that's a tangent, but yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure too. And that discussion and that communion with somebody. Don't relitigate the past.
Yeah. All right. Looking forward to part 2. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, very welcome. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Chris Don.
If you made it this far, we greatly appreciate you joining us. Share this with someone that you think may enjoy it as well. Please contact us at chronic-curiosity.com for any and all things. We'd love to hear from you.